Congratulations, first of all, to Comité Colbert and IFCCI for signing the MOU. I want to do very quick context-laying pieces. I was the first editor of Marie Claire in India. The little bit of training I have in fashion was done here in the city, but I haven't heard India mentioned so many times ever since until today, and I can tell you that I did get to his flesh. I'm now editor of The Voice of Fashion, but essentially a journalist and author. And of the few consumer studies that The Voice of Fashion has conducted, the most recent was released in March, called The Atlas of Affluence on the Rise of Indian Luxury. It was published as a book. Most of you or many of you will find it on your way out in the bags that you carry. It's a printed book, which is the reason why I am here. I do say, as editor-in-chief of that book, of a consortium of articles on Indian luxury, that consumer studies are consumer studies. But more than that, they are psychology studies, they are anthropological studies. When we speak of luxury in these contexts, it did strike to my writer's mind that we did not speak of the fact that the Indian consumer, if they have changed, they have also changed because music has changed, because Indian literature has changed. A Kannada-speaking writer, Banu Mushtaq, translated in English, won the Booker Prize last year. There is film, OTT, cinema. There are several dialogues that sit outside what we define as luxury within fashion, retail, jewelry, and certain immediate realizations that come to us as luxury. And that has changed India as well, the Indian consumer. I am privileged to talk about the Indian consumer and the changes in behavior, also because India is fractured. It has always been fractured. It is further fractured by the inequalities of income and wealth. So, which is the luxury consumer that we are talking about? And when we say we'll take insights from these three people on my panel for international brands and back home for Indians listening to us if they are, which luxury consumer are we addressing? All of them or no? The three people on the panel each have had experience that sees luxury and anthropology and craft and collaboration and communication, all these beautiful words we associate, through three different prisms. Karishma through craft, through collaboration with Dior, through fashion design for Jade. Rohan is one of the first people I know in the Indian luxury market representing Estée Lauder and group, and talks about consumer insights ever since I remember. Vikram Goyal through design, through art, through sculpture and materiality. So let me start, Karishma, with you. Because Dior and the show at Gateway of India and Chanakya School were mentioned earlier this afternoon, and the ambassador himself said that it changed something. You know, that visual went out all over the world. What I want to ask you is, and if you can talk a little bit of your work through that, what did it change for the Indian consumer? It changed something for Dior, it changed something for artisan, it changed something for fashion. What about the consumers?
Well, thank you, Shefalee, and thank you for having me here today. Congratulations on this wonderful coming together. Much needed. I think both countries have so much to offer and so much in common. The love for beauty and craft, I think, to begin with. When we think about the Indian consumer, that was a question. I think when we look at India, it's really such a heterogeneous landscape, isn't it? It's impossible to talk about one consumer. But what we have seen, I think, over the last decade is this global shift, and then, of course, a shift within India as well, on who India is. Who is she really? And I think there is an increasing awareness about her being the seat, the original seat of luxury, not only to be able to create beauty at extraordinary levels, but also now this hunger within India to connect with that beauty and to find identity within that beauty. I think when the Dior show happened, for me, for both my regards and me, it really was something personal. It was about being able to recognize the makers and how they really hold, in so many ways, our cultures and our collective identities. But what transpired after the show was honestly beyond my imagination. I think within India there was this incredible need to understand, what it means, why our cultures are tangible through craft and why we personally identify with them. And I see that through the world today, really being able to understand, why craft is important, and why for the Indian consumer it's important to understand now luxury, not so much through validation, but more through expression of self.
May I come to you, Vikram? We are all in the business of taste in one form or the other, cultivating and expressing an aesthetic. Is India consuming better or is it creating better? Or is there a head-on collision and conflict between the two causing a shift?
Thank you for having me here. Congratulations. I just want to lay context of what I've been seeing in the last 10 or 15 years in design. First of all, what we're seeing is the Gilded Age. The growth in high-end residential luxury residences is staggering, much like what you saw in the Americas during the Gilded Age, with the Maharajas and the palaces, the ostentatious display of wealth. And this you see across India, across metros, tier 2 cities, mountains, by the ocean, it's all over. The second trend has been what I call what's been called the death of the drawing room. And the India we lived in, and even the super rich, the luxury customer had, they were lived around rooms of personality. There's always a bit of India, whether it's through sculpture, book, art, artifacts, or even the ones who embraced a European sensibility. But there was something which had personality, individuality. And what I've been seeing for the last 10, 15 years ago is in India interior very influenced by interior designers and architects who been very influenced by European brands. And they were traveling to typically Italy more than any other country. And you had this sense of luxury residences which looked like airport lounges, for lack of a better word. They all look kind of modernized and compartmentalized into a straight line, cookie cutter, contemporary aesthetic. And what I've been seeing since then, the last 10 years, is that you have a lot of young people, affluent people who are well-traveled, who are global, and they're bringing their sensibility into it. And they've gone from airport lounges or first class to what you could call no class or more is more. And everyone's trying to outdo one another. And I remember in Delhi, 15 years ago, there was this house which played host to one of the Dior shows with 3 swimming pools, one of which looked like a lake. But now that's kind of, passes. So there is this big shift about more is more, display of wealth, running across the luxury consumer. The one saving grace is the return of craft or the discovery of craft. Everyone's now trying to identify.
Why is it the return? On the one hand, we say India is a living ecology of culture.
Because the India I grew up in, when you had Fab India, for example, you lived around craft. You couldn't get away from cane or coir or cotton, or it was just hand-printed, block-printed cushions that you got. And that quickly vanished. And now it's come back in interiors, in our spaces, and also from a supply point of view. There are many interesting work being done by Indian designers. There are platforms like India Art Fair and Design Fair and all of those things.
Yeah, that's what I want to probe you a bit earlier. Are we creating better?
We are at the beginning of it. We are creating better. It's we have to work harder because, especially in the international scene, because there already is this perception, justifiably not, I don't know, of you coming from India, Indians tend to, and I say this kind of with large generalization. Indians tend to over-decorate. They over-adorn. They don't know when to stop.
I think you use the word devolution at some
The
point, if
devolution,
I'm not
yes,
well.
you
It's
asked
not
about
just evolution.
Evolution or devolution, and sometimes they go hand in hand. Look, they go hand in hand across the world. It's not just India, it's probably China, Russia, any new economy, any newly rich economy.
Rohan, between the push and pull of evolution and devolution, because it's seldom a linear path, and literature and cinema push us also to think differently of conflicts. How is data, what is data telling you? You are a man of data. What is the surge of beauty, both as aspiration through the product? What is it telling you about the Indian consumer specifically?
Thank you, Shefalee, and congratulations. I've been with Estée Lauder now for 20 years in India. And our first store we opened, and you were very much part of it, you were the editor of March there then, 20 years ago. We didn't know. It was an experiment. One store, didn't know if it would succeed. And today, we're at 800 points of sale across India. So from a beauty company today, and we talk beauty and I represent beauty, we have been able to scale. But what are you talking about when you talk about India? It's not one country. It is 26, 27, depending on the number of states we create, because we create states every day, unfortunately. Different consumers. They speak different languages, they have different regimes, they have different beauty regimes, and they have different aspirations. How are we building desirability? How are we building aspiration? And are you addressing their need at the right price point? And since you asked for data, 56% of all beauty consumers in India are Gen Z. 56%. Now, let me put that in millions for you. That is 45 million Indian women today, of which 56% of them are Generation Z. How do you attract them? How do you play for aspiration? How do you play for desirability? And how do you make both what we like to call luxury, but how do you also make it accessible? The same 56%, so 45 million, the average spend for beauty in India is $88 annually. So if you want to sell to a very few, go ahead, everyone's doing it. But if you want to tap the ocean, which everyone talks about, which is India, you've got to rejig your strategy. Otherwise, beautiful. Play small, play beautifully. You want to go big, you've got to think different.
Since you mentioned airport lounges looking like houses, I want to tell our audience here that a very new book released in India by Juggernaut called Taste,
Yes.
limited edition, has a wonderfully insightful essay by Atish the Sea.
He's the one who coined this depth of the drawing.
So, because his mother used to say, "Ke drawing room kahan gaya?" And yet Atish visits more and more houses to find they all look like each other. They look like wealthy people's houses. There's expensive art. There are more than expensive floors. You need OTPs to enter the camellias and magnolias of your own house. Everything has a guard. You are guarded by the guard, and he steps into a house owned by Shahid Kapoor, the film star, and he's taken through a mirage of mirrors and beautiful, expensive things, and he stumbles into the photograph of the star and says, "Who's this?" And then the person who's accompanying him says, "Inika to ghar hai, this is his house." And he suddenly has a moment of realization that it's Shahid Kapoor's house, looking like 60 houses he has seen in Oberoi 360 in Bombay and Magnolias and all. So what has changed? How have you corrected yourself as a designer to speak to this person of taste?
Via Italy. Because I worked with a well-known Italian gallery, and we showcased at international platforms. When I started this 20 years ago, we were banging on, and this is the language of India modern. There were very few takers. And thankfully, you've traveled now via Italy, and you've got the validation of one of the top international galleries. And now you have, the local architects, interiors coming to you. And very often it is at the behest of the final consumer who has traveled, who's been to Milan, and they are saying, no, why don't you consider this? Not the interior designer architect, who many of them are still stuck in that world of polyform and modular, very, very expensive furniture brands. So I think it's, and also that kind of, we've also participated in the art fair. There's a lot more appreciation and recognition of design brands, which wasn't the case 10 years ago. Now you have a whole pavilion at the art fair devoted to design. You have another one in Mumbai. 2 or 3 more people want to set up. So it's changing, and Instagram has made a lot of this very easy. You don't have to have the stores. You have a good idea. You've got India's, there's no more craft available anywhere in the world other than India. That much craft and embroideries to rope, to cane, it's endless. And very young people are producing really good stuff.
Dhruv Kapoor said earlier in the day that it can't just be heritage. I want to bring this to you. It can't just be heritage, and you are in the Trojan horse as well as in Chanakya school, using heritage to drive something else. How do you define your work today? How do you speak to the consumer? If Dior were not in your life, Chanakya school is still there. How do you speak to the consumer?
I think yes. I think when Dhruv said it, he couldn't be more precise. But when we think about what heritage is, I think there's this notion of nostalgia and thinking about it as something in the past. And that is exactly, in fact, the purpose of the school. Heritage is in so many ways a foundation, and it allows you to know the practice at the heart. Without that foundation, it's really going to be exponentially harder to create and innovate. So I think what we do at the school is really not just, of course, there's the preservation, but there's the perpetuation through innovation, through education, and through really being able to create a new language, whether it's craft or really being able to create a visual vocabulary that lends to an identity. When we think about India, for chorus, we look at it as really being able to evolve the textile architectures of the subcontinent. And it is such an infinite language that we are so fortunate to be able to delve within, to explore and to innovate. I think many parts of the world have lost that. So I think it's such a collective responsibility, so many creatives in the room, to be able to not stop exploring and then really be able to find the balance between something that is relevant to the consumer today, but still holds an identity that's important.
I want to ask you all, and first Rohan, this pretty beast called storytelling. Are we running away with that idea constantly? And it's been a few years now that storytelling is important. So of course it's important. It's always been important. There have been designers who have told stories through ramps. Rajesh Pratap put masks on the mouths of some models at a time when India's freedom to speak was not so unfree. John Galliano showed Abu Ghraib on a runway. And there have been storytelling. But Rohan, tell me, how can storytelling substitute product? You are in the business of selling products and collecting data around that. How do storytelling and product find their coziness together?
I think all brands, they're master storytellers, and brands that are emerging need to learn how to tell good stories. But if we again talk about India, how do we tell stories when we're still maintaining global equity, But then at some point, how do you regionalize some of these stories? How do you celebrate? I think earlier someone mentioned Holi. I think it was the Secretary General of the LVMH. How do you celebrate Holi? How do you turn Holi into a celebration that is desirable? How do you take Diwali for all the luxury brands? They've really embraced Chinese New Year for many, many years. But no one really embraced Diwali, but it's the most important regional relevant moment in India. Brands that did it early have continued to gain. What again, if you use data, the uplift that a brand gets when you do regional relevance is over 30% of what a global campaign carries for you in India. So yes, storytelling is important, but also in this, trust is important. Brands that are working internationally, the French brands that are coming into India, how do you trust your Indian teams? How do you work with your Indian teams to say, what more do you need? And that is something that we've done exceedingly, I say, consciously well with the Estée Lauder companies. We have the trust of the global team. When do we do something local? When do we do and stay global? But there is a transition that you have to continue to make to build that desirability. I'm going to use Masoom since she's sitting right here in the front. Masoom's been an advocate with the Estée Lauder brand for 7 years or longer. And one of our best sellers, our advanced nitric acid serum. How do you create that local desirability? She's just featured in a new campaign with us. And it is again about creating desirability to really elevate what we're trying to tell with Indian skin tones, with Indian textures, rather than just putting a Western face in a country that has completely no relevance to it.
If I remember, this serum has been your personal favorite for 25 years as well.
The company is very generous. We get a gratis every quarter, and my gratis is only at advanced nitric acid, and that is not applied.
Vikram, what does storytelling do for your sense of design and the aesthetic and the artist that you are?
I think storytelling can only take you so far. The crux of it is the design and the aesthetic. And how do you make that internationally relevant? And in my experience, it's been by participating on the global platform. I would not have managed it if I had just been swimming in the Indian pool. And that's really what's pushed me to, when I'm showcasing alongside other international design brands, it pushes me every year to speak in a language that is resonant. And the storytelling just adds another layer of what you're trying to say. And the more confident when I first started working with Indo-French, I played along. I operated in the language of very kind of abstract, organic, sculptural. So that's what sometimes you have to be accepted. You have to please and appease that kind of crowd. But over the years, I've gotten more confident and been able to bring Indian storytelling into my work. Last year in Paris, I showed a design line in Paris, and I did animals and brought the Panchatantra fables fully graphically represented in the inside of the animals. So that comes with, I've done and made the cabinets and consoles, and now I want to do something which is more Indian, more real, more me. So it's really been the design, I think, which to me is the most important.
Both of you show at India Art Fair, you participate. Who are you converting? Are you talking to the Indian consumer there, or you're talking to the West? While showing at India Art Fair?
Because we don't have galleries, so as artists do, and that becomes the only place for us to showcase our work locally. So it's mostly the end consumer, not the interior designer and architect. It's mostly the end consumer.
I'll refine that question a little for Karishma. Clearly, there is no fashion without art. There is no art without a bit of cloth. There is no tactility without texture and textile, pottery, ceramics, and this world of aesthetic and beauty that we now call authenticity and identity. Do you get to present this communion better at India Art Fair?
I think for us as practitioners, being able to talk to clients and consumers in fairs like this is imperative for not only being able to directly be able to showcase why we do what we do, and also I think there's been such a growing curiosity within India about textile, the practice of textiles. So for us, it's really being able to connect directly. The platform is both Indian and global, but what we've managed to do is really then be able to create a community, because over time it's the same people that are able to come to us, understand, enjoy better, and while it's become an important platform for art, of course, world over now. What I think what makes it unique is me being able to be there and really be able to connect personally, which otherwise I'm never able to do.
We might have a direct insight for people wanting to work in the luxury market in India or any market in India. Do Indians respond better to a sense of community? Rohan, you talked about the kajal once to me, and that Estée Lauder, Bobbi Brown were amongst the first brands to introduce an Indian kajal. It's a kind of a community. People group around not just the kajal as a beauty product. So are Indians led by ideas of community, that we think together, we belong together? Is there a belongingness that the international market can somehow tap? Rohan first, and perhaps all of you can answer it, and I think we have 5 more minutes.
If you look at an Indian woman, her expression is with the eyes. And as Western companies, we were trying to sell mascara in a country that never wore mascara. We wore kajal. We always wore kajal. And it took us some time. I had to convince New York to say, what I need for eyes is a kajal. And today it is one of our best-selling products, both for Bobbi Brown, but also for MAC. And the idea, again, was how do you cater to your sense of community? But that community is, what does she want? Or what does this consumer want? Or are you trying to sell her something or him something that they don't want or they don't need? And that comes again back with a sense of community, but also a sense of aspiration and very, very clearly a sense of desirability. Vikram spoke about, sometimes you've got to go outside India to come back and be relevant in India. Sometimes you have to do it with your home. And Forest Essentials is another one of those beautiful brands. 2 stores in 2008, if you remember. 160 today. Vikram was very much part of Kama at the original stage. These are brands that have now created a mark of community and desirability, but also using traditional methods, science in India, which now becomes very much part of what we discussed, EU FTAs and everything else. So how do you now take this that is now growing as a demand from an international community perspective and then reverse engineer it? So it goes both ways.
Yeah, and I'm seeing definitely a great sense of pride in India and craft, and this is something I've been seeing now for the last 5 or 6 years. And to that extent, at the very high-end customer level, it's the exception who's not interested. Everyone's trying to bring in craft, much more so than they're trying to bring in art. Maybe that's to do with the appreciation of contemporary art. I don't know what it is, but there is. And also it gives them the flexibility to customize. Everyone wants something which they say, only make it for us. So they all want something which is unique, and you customize it and they are willing to pay for it. Bespoke.
Craft has always been community, at least in India. No lone craftsperson ever worked. There were lone artists who would work in studios. And now the studio shift of, hopefully one would see a craftsperson studio someday in India, a rural craftsperson studio. But coming to that, last questions from you, if we could do it as a short rapid fire round. What are the myths that we should rest about Indian consumers? There have been myths going on that they like big logos, they must display well, that it's all about infectious.
I just want to say the big logos. The big logos are being set by the European companies.
Yes.
The European
Nevertheless.
fashion brands are the ones who are feeding the big logos. Having that pushed quiet luxury, then maybe they want to be pushing the big logos.
I'm actually speaking for the Western brands to say, are there myths we should rest?
I think this for one, there is this need to now move from validity and instant recognition to something more personal. I also feel that I hope this is true, that there's this need to constantly create at the speed of light, and that for me is already anti-luxury. And so I wish that there is now
A certain slowness.
a certain slowness that India can maybe lead the way with.
Rohan, what would you say? Is there a myth you want to rest? Something you have learned from the Indian consumer?
By 2030, that 45 million consumer number that I was talking about will be 130 million consumers. So you've got to break the myth of how you continue to build inspiration quietly, subtly, but give them what they need at the right price points, with the right access.
Can I box you a bit into a yes or no?
Sure.
Because the word devolution came from you. Is India more wealthy or more discerning? If you'll have
More
to.
wealthy.
So we should still teach this discernment. And with that, we come to a close of our 30 minutes round. I do want to say that the Atlas of Affluence, Rise of Indian Luxury, taught me through the survey that Kantar did that Indian luxury in India for consumers has become a continuum. It's no longer just the bag, the product, the experience. It's mixed into wellness. It's about what it did to you 3 months later. Is there fairness into it? Is there some sense of transparency, continuity? These words are infusing the vocabulary, and it can no longer just be about the quality of the product. It is going to be a very long experience of making, and that's an eye-opening piece for me as a journalist. Thank you very much, all of you. Vikram, Rohan, Karishma, my honor and privilege to be here.
We have a question from the postcard picture. For our next panel, we are trying something fun, so I'm sure you don't want to miss it. I'm very pleased to invite you. I'm very pleased to invite you next